This is Power and Influence. The heat is on.
We found measurable warming, like 5 football fields downwind of the data centers.
An ASU researcher's claims and the cost to nearby homeowners.
When we're talking about 1 or 2 degrees Fahrenheit, you'd expect a several percent increase in your utility bill.
But David Saylor wants to harmonize those risks with sound policy.
I think it's an important part of our future economy.
I'm not kidding when I say harmonize.
I thought I'd use AI to write some lyrics for a song about my research.
Really?
1,000 silver surfers breathing out into the sky.
I'm definitely guilty of using data centers in ways that are frivolous, I guess.
Also,
there is more regulation on a bratwurst than the entire artificial intelligence industry.
Using parody to push for transparency. I sit down with comedian Charlie Berens, connecting with a new audience.
We shouldn't have to pay for these billionaires to become trillionaires.
We are looking at doubling Wisconsin's power usage.
What are the chemicals that are being put in the water of these systems?
These are difficult, serious ideas.
Oh yeah, it's a bummer. I haven't said one thing funny.
This is Power and Influence. I'm Joe Dana. Joining me is David Saylor in the School of Geographical Sciences and Urban Planning at ASU. Your report was just published in the Journal of Engineering for Sustainable Buildings and Cities, Data Center Waste Heat as an Emerging Urban Thermal Hazard. We knew that these things can consume a lot of water, and of course they demand a ton of electricity. But now there's something else to think about, the heat coming off of data centers.
We found measurable warming, at least like 5 football fields downwind of the data centers. So on that order of magnitude of 5 or 6 blocks.
I had no idea. So you're saying this is a previously undocumented hazard that demands attention from the data center and urban planning communities. Sort of raising the flag here, say, hey, everyone, pay attention, it sounds like.
Exactly. For decades, we've known that anthropogenic waste heat can warm neighborhoods, but that's from conventional sources that are typically relatively small, certainly compared to a data center, tens of watts per square meter of heat intensity compared to thousands which come off of data centers.
The report found, for example, a 36 megawatt data center rejects waste heat equivalent to electricity of the consumption of 40,000 households. A 169 megawatt campus equivalent to 180,000 households. How significant is this?
The heat emissions from the data center are relatively uniform over the course of the day. It operates 24/7. And so that heat is coming off the rooftop air conditioning equipment constantly. And depending upon, the wind speeds and directions, sometimes that heat will be mixed more so than other times into the neighborhood downwind. And it can raise the air temperature in the neighborhood by 1 or 2 degrees Fahrenheit.
How does this heat impact electricity bills? Does it make a difference?
It certainly does. Typically, when we're talking about 1 or 2 degrees Fahrenheit elevation in air temperature, you'd expect a several percent increase in your utility bill. And so for an individual home, that may not be, it might be on the order of tens of dollars.
Wait, tens of dollars per month? Or
Yeah.
for the whole season?
Per month for the season.
Okay, so you could actually see a difference of many dollars.
Right. And
In your bill,
in your
monthly bill,
yeah.
because you're closer to a data center.
Yeah. One thing we have done is we've looked at elevated air temperatures across the city. If the entire city air temperature were raised by 1 degree Fahrenheit throughout the summer months, that would lead to tens of millions of dollars of increased air conditioning bills per year with all the homes in Phoenix.
This is incredible. And this is something that I would imagine perhaps utilities may push back on or really question the evidence about. So how specific can you get?
There are decades of modeling evidence looking at the relationship between air conditioning energy use and outside ambient air temperature. And what we are doing right now is we're gathering all the data around these data centers really to help train and validate our own models.
Okay.
So we have a model that allows us to simultaneously model the outdoor thermal environment and the building energy consumption of the individual homes that are in that neighborhood. And so we can, in our model, very easily turn off the waste heat emissions and turn it back on and see what the difference is in terms of the utility bill.
You went to 4 different data centers in the Phoenix area. You spent time driving these streets around these data centers both day and night?
Earliest measurements were at 5 in the morning, but the latest were at 5 in the afternoon.
While you're driving, are you playing your favorite 80s rock bands? Music up, music down.
Actually, I'm talking into my phone, which is mounted on my dashboard, taking video. I'm annotating my drive, telling my phone that, okay, I'm driving past a sprinkler on my right. It's like I try to capture any unique features because there's so much variability in the urban environment. You might accidentally attribute an effect to something that is the wrong cause.
As viewers look at these images, what does it tell you more than anything?
Every little dot that you see, and you can kind of see that they're individual dots, is an air temperature reading. So we typically sample it every 1 or 2 seconds. We're measuring air temperature as we drive. These yellow dots are among the hottest, and the bluish ones are among the coolest. And what you very consistently see, you see the arrows pointing in the wind direction, and very consistently downwind, there's a warming effect.
You looked at the Apple data center. This is in Mesa. It's right near Highland Ridge Park, near some neighborhoods and homes, maybe 300 or 400 yards. You looked at one called the Mesa NTTPH1 data center. If you're going to build a data center, you got to come up with a good name. I mean, that one's rough. Iron Mountain data center. That is a company, right?
Yep.
Iron Mountain. And then the Cyrus 1 data center. This one's in the tech corridor in Chandler off Ellis. Does downwind change?
Downwind does change, and we definitely notice this in our observations. We've made more observations since this paper came out, and what we notice pretty consistently is regardless of the wind direction, it's oftentimes from the west or from the south, but it does change over the day. It changes from one day to the next, and very consistently, downwind is where we saw an elevated air temperature.
You consider we already have more than 100 data centers concentrated in the greater Phoenix area, many adjacent to apartment complexes, neighborhoods. You got new data centers under construction or planned, one in Ahwatukee across the street from an existing neighborhood, an apartment complex also being built next door to it. The Bacara data center, approved by county supervisors in Surprise. They're building a 700 megawatt natural gas power plant as well. City ordinances related to data centers. They basically say data centers should be at least, 400, 500 feet from homes. I mean, have we underestimated how far away these should be? And because it sounds like it may be too late for a lot of us.
I mean, in some instances, yes, but certainly some of the data centers we've looked at, the rooftop equipment on the data center is closer to a couple hundred feet from the nearest residential building. Certainly in those situations, the heat will find its way into that neighborhood. Yeah, it's an open question about whether the required offsets need to be larger.
In addition, you say there's a multi-level apartment complex. Those folks on the upper level could be affected more than the others.
Absolutely, yes. And unfortunately, that in many cases, our observations are limited in terms of where we have access to make measurements. But those top floors are roughly at the same height above ground level as the rooftop of the data center where all the equipment is that's releasing all that heat.
The Cyrus 1 data center in Chandler in the Price Road Tech Corridor, that's about, 4 to 5 blocks north of Hilton Suites. I noticed that.
Mm-hmm. The Hilton that you're talking about is separated by an agricultural field. There will be that little bit of cooling that you get as the air flows over an irrigated field. And that is something that we've noticed across these different data centers. That one on another side, it's bordered by a park. When the winds are blowing over the data center and over the park towards the neighborhood, there's actually a cooling effect downwind of that park, which is overwhelming the warming effect from the data center.
Is anthropogenic waste heat discussed in community meetings or in zoning documents or just contracts? You got these tech companies and data center companies. They obviously have people like you working there. These engineers are like, hey, by the way, just so you know, the anthropogenic effect of this data center will probably be a couple degrees in those surrounding neighborhoods. Could we be seeing companies liable?
I don't really think I can speak to that
Are you going
liability
to
question.
declare a lawsuit today on behalf of?
No. So the data centers are aware of the heat, and I've been on a data center roof, as have many data center engineers, and they know the amount of heat coming off the HVAC equipment. It's not like 1 or 2 degrees. It's tens of degrees hotter on the rooftop. And so it's a very evident fact to them. But they're not directly involved in providing electricity to the
No.
customers downwind. They have nothing to gain or lose by that effect.
But they
And
submit environmental impact reports, right?
presumably, yes. So,
And
yeah.
if it's possible, they could just leave that out conveniently, knowing, well, we don't want to talk about anthropogenic impact.
We have started talking
Yeah.
with data centers themselves and with the utilities, and they do not seem to be trying to hide anything. In fact, they're interested in this story. They want to understand not just, okay, what is the harm to the neighbors, but they want to understand, well, is there a way for us to be better neighbors? What can we do about it? And so we're working or hoping to work more with the data centers, the companies that design and build and operate data centers, to explore solutions.
Speaking of solutions, when you and I met at the ASU showcase of
Yes.
heat research, I mean, this was so inspiring, for one, just to see these bright young minds who were all putting all their efforts into different solutions for our future, right? What do you see as maybe the first most obvious area to address the data center heat problem?
It's hard for me to prioritize because, again, we haven't done the final evaluation. But there are things that can be done related to the design of the equipment that's rejecting this heat, depending upon the geometry of the parapet walls on top of the data centers, how tall they are. That can affect mixing as well. If you look at some of these data centers on maps, you'll see that they are actively implementing some of these strategies already in terms of lush, green vegetation and some water features. The upshot from our work is that this is a time of rapid expansion of data centers across the country, and especially here in Phoenix. Our work, we hope, is the first step in getting us to a data center environment where the downwind warming effects are dealt with, and we have one less concern related to the impacts of data centers.
Could we be overreacting here, or is this going to be a real obvious concern?
It is an obvious concern to me, at least, as someone who studies urban heat. Throughout most of my career, the focus has been on building materials. So I've been studying for my entire career what are the causes of the urban heat island effect. And so we typically would think about building materials, the solar reflectance of surfaces like your rooftop and so forth. Anthropogenic waste heat was always in the discussion. When we start thinking about the order of magnitude of the waste heat coming off of data centers, it actually becomes one of the key drivers of variation in air temperature from one neighborhood to another.
What I've been trying to do with this Power and Influence series is just empower the average citizens to understand better, how your electricity bill works, how energy policy impacts your environment. Our future is based so much on our ability to generate more energy. We just did a story about how water levels going down at Hoover mean there's going to be less power generation at Hoover, up to potentially 80% less by the end of the year. And so we seem to also be at this perfect storm of scarcity and needing more power. Does your research cause you to also question whether we should be building these things?
I don't really question whether we should be building them. I more question, how we should be building them. I think it's an important part of our future economy if it's done right.
What's the key you keep your guitar in for what song?
Oh, open G tuning? Keith Richards tuning.
Keith Richards tuning. That's well. Next time in, we need to have you maybe make an opening song for Power and Influence. Bring the guitar.
Ironically,
Okay.
just the other day, I thought I'd use AI to write some lyrics for a song about my research.
Really?
And so I gave it a very detailed prompt, and I was just expecting lyrics. And so I pressed return on my keypad, went to the restroom, came back, and not only had it completed the lyrics, it had cover art and the full music.
And it was generated by one of those data
So-
centers you drove by.
They drink in the electrons, but the fever's gonna rise. 1,000 silver surfers breathing out into the sky. Yeah, we're running, trying to set the pace. But the desert's getting hotter in the AI race.
I'm definitely guilty of using data centers in in ways that are frivolous, I guess.
Well, to be fair, you didn't sit here and bash the data center industry. David Saylor, thank you.
Glad to be here.
So we're going to end this with this Midwestern comic who is actually very popular around the country. I was able to catch up with him when he passed through Arizona recently. Charlie Berens, just a really gifted guy. He wants to educate people because he wants citizens to understand what's coming. A tour stop through Arizona, drawing big crowds.
Enjoy the show.
They are here to see a comedian and an activist of sorts, Charlie Berens.
We love that somebody with as big of a platform as him is bringing these ideas to light.
This isn't we the people, it's they the billionaires.
Wisconsin born and raised, Berens balances Midwestern humor with the occasional social commentary
Make your voice heard.
about what may be the most serious issue of our time.
There is more regulation on a bratwurst than the entire artificial intelligence industry.
Berens found his voice when companies targeted his home state to build hyperscale data centers.
What it was is just people not wanting some outside entity to decide their future and feel like they don't have a say.
Thank you, everybody, for showing up. We are looking at doubling Wisconsin's power usage.
When you got like just a few billionaires and trillion-dollar companies deciding the future of a community you grew up living in your whole life.
I know it's a public utility, but it seems like the only thing that's public is the risk. And all the profits, that's private.
This new thing kind of forced upon you, despite doing all the things they say to do. Go to the Common Council meetings, make your voice heard. I felt like, you got no other choice.
We need to steal the people's data so AI can take their job.
Yeah, but we don't call them the people, we call them the product.
Right.
And we don't say steal, we say
Terms and conditions. Yes.
It's hitting the environmental issues, it's hitting people's power bills, it's hitting people's feeling of their own localized control.
Berens joins consumer groups demanding regulators ban secret contracts.
Shut your mouth. We're just going to tell them it's a trade secret.
If you have something you don't want someone else to hear, you save that for confession, okay? And Father Tom does those at the bar every Tuesday night.
Wisconsin lawmakers put forward a bill to regulate AI data centers. And is this it?
What has sort of driven you most?
Well, I grew up in one of 12 kids, and in a family like that, you learn you're not the most important person in the room and that you take care of everybody else. My dad, he's a good woodworker. He would teach me things about woodworking. Tech has this motto, move fast and break things. It's measure twice, cut once, What that means is you take your time, you make sure this thing you're putting out isn't gonna raise the temperature around the area by X amount of degrees, or you make sure the chemicals in the water aren't going to do anything to people. You make sure that people's energy bills aren't going to be raised.
These are difficult, serious ideas.
Oh yeah, it's a bummer. I haven't said one thing funny. I'm just glad that you guys put me in front of the weed plant so people can, be like, this guy, this stoned comedian.
It's interesting because you have a journalism background. Does it feel like you're still doing a form of journalism? Or activism?
I'm trying to get real information out there. The vast majority of people commenting online are opposed to this, opposed to what's going on, because it's hitting all different realms of the political spectrum.
It's closed loop technology.
How often do you have to change the water? What are you putting in the water?
It's hitting the environmental issues.
Will you pay for the additional health costs associated with building all the new gas plants or keeping coal plants online longer? My grandpa had COPD. That's something that if you have all this stuff floating through the air, that impacts that quite a bit. And people don't think, you don't think about the human cost of what you're putting into the environment. It's not a bunch of hippie crap.
What are the chemicals that are being put in the water of these systems? We still don't have answers to that in Wisconsin. There are groupings of things, corrosion inhibitors or things like that, but if you then look up the corrosion inhibitors, PFAS is a big, you can use PFAS there. There are lakes in Wisconsin I can't even eat the fish out of, and that's because we already rolled the dice on trusting corporations to do the right thing. And we just want our walleyes with a side of coleslaw, not cancer, Can you actually make a law or a penalty that they care about? Like if everything's just a parking ticket, then where's the motivation to follow the law? If we even get to the point of putting laws up for this, because right now the best we have is a pledge. Like the best the tech companies gave the White House was a pledge to not raise our power bills. That's it? How many of us took a pledge in DARE class? You know what I mean?
And I'm not saying we can't build the future, but we have to be smart about it. Because what good is the future without our freedom?
If people don't want this in the town, and they show up week after week after week after week to say that, you say, I respect you, and take your business somewhere else.